Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. 2219, the Defense Department Appropriations Act for fiscal year 2012 represents $530 billion in regular discretionary spending, $8.9 billion below the President's request, but $17 billion above the fiscal year 2011 enacted. Before going further into my remarks, I'd like to thank my friend and fellow Floridian for yielding time to me, and I extend a personal thanks to he and his family, and particularly his 3 sons that are serving in the Army. I don't have 3 sons, but I had 3 uncles that served in the Army in another era in the Second World War. And as I was proud of them, I'm also proud of Mr. Nugent's sons and the many families and service men and women in our military. From pay raises for military operations, this legislation offers a basically reasonable and comprehensive approach to our nation's defense activities. Yet, really, the staggering amounts of money this country continues to devote to the military. At a time of fiscal austerity, when the majority is slashing tens of billions of dollars from essential social programs, it's, in my view, absurd that we continue to exempt the Department of Defense from the same scrutiny that we apply to our domestic programs. For all of the rhetoric that I've heard through the years from my colleagues on the other aisle about runaway spending, the fact of the matter is that Republicans actually increase spending in this bill. While they insist that more families must go hungry, less students need to go to college, less firefighters and teachers need to work in our cities, and less jobs need to be created, the Republican majority believes that $649 billion still isn't quite enough. The United States accounts for 43% of all military spending on Earth. We already outspend Russia and China, the next biggest spenders, by a factor of 6. We tell teachers they can't get classroom supplies, but we don't tell admirals that they can't have more submarines. We tell mayors that they can't have more cops, but we don't tell generals that they can't have more ballistic missiles. And we tell Americans that they can't get their roads fixed or their levees strengthened, but here we are funding a next generation of nuclear weapons. Not to mention that we already have enough nuclear weapons to kill everybody on Earth 25 times over. Mr. Speaker, we need to recognize that our priorities are askew and our spending on defense is unsustainable. Let me give you an example. The Republican majority recently cut 1/3, or proposed cutting 1/3 of the budget, almost $500 million from the Food for Peace program. Over the course of almost 50 years, this program has delivered life-saving food supplies to over 3 billion people. As John F. Kennedy correctly noted when he was running for president, and I quote him, "Food is peace," unquote. Yet these cuts mean that millions of people in vulnerable and underdeveloped regions of the world will not receive food aid from the United States. The Arab Springs uprisings that arose in Tunisia were largely because of the concerns for food, and that is true elsewhere in the Middle East and North Africa. And this particular year should be a reminder that conflict erupts when people go without their most basic needs, including food. And at the same time, when people see that the food they receive is coming from the United States, and I've had the good fortune of visiting around the world, having served over a period of time, 8 years, over a period of 10 years, on the Intelligence Committee here in Congress, and having served previous to that on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and now serving on the Committee for Security and Cooperation in Europe. I've had an opportunity to see firsthand in Germany countless amounts of food stamped with USA on them, and I've seen them in camps, and I suffer with the people now in the southern Sudan. My colleague Donald Payne and a former colleague Harry Johnston from West Palm Beach were together at a refugee camp in Nimali, and previous to that in Mombasa, Kenya. I've seen our food aid around the world to American extremism that often festers in these regions and manifests itself into conflicts that we wind up having to go and fight about. So the reality, Mr. Speaker, is that food aid is actually critical to our national security. And the spending that we do to preempt or prevent conflicts means the less money that we have to spend later fighting them. We're doing a disservice to our servicemen and women by cutting programs that reduce the risk of war while adding billions to programs that create ever more powerful methods to wage war. At the same time, we need to recognize that the increasing amounts we spend on the military means the less money we have here at home to address our pressing domestic concerns. All of us heard the President of the United States last night speak to this issue, that while it may appear and might readily be perceived as nation building that we are doing in some countries, it is time for us, as the President said, to begin domestic building. When I went to Iraq a few years ago, they showed us the remains of a water treatment plant. We spent $14 million building that plant, and just as soon as it was finished, somebody came and blew it up. Mr. Speaker, I see us building water treatment plants in Basra and in Baghdad, in Kandahar, and in Kabul. But I don't see us building much-needed water treatment plants in the cities of the Glades that I represent, Belgrade, Pahokee, and Clewiston, as well as others, Deerfield Beach and Miramar, my hometown. I've had requests for water treatment matters, as well as Riviera Beach. Every year, cities and counties in the congressional district that I'm privileged to serve come begging and asking for money to support infrastructure projects that no one is likely to blow up, and yet we don't fund them. I don't say that we shouldn't help the Iraqi or the Afghan people develop their country, but I do say that we ought to be mindful that in our own country we have bridges collapsing, dams breaking, levees failing, roads crumbling, and water utilities leaking away. We simply cannot justify to the American people our willingness to spend tens of billions of dollars in Iraq and Afghanistan while neglecting those same efforts here at home. Finally, Mr. Speaker, this measure contains several $billions in aid to Pakistan. As I've said before, you can't readily say the word Afghanistan without also saying the word Pakistan. To the extent that we are involved in Afghanistan, we also are involved in Pakistan. But we send billions of dollars to Pakistan only to see large sums of that money be used against American interests, funding the very same extremist groups that we are trying to eliminate. A recent article in the New Yorker magazine noted that the Pakistani military submits expense claims every month to the United States Embassy in Islamabad. No receipts are provided, and none are even requested. We're sending money out the door into one of the most conflict-ridden regions of the world without so much as an understanding of where that money is going, what exactly it is being used for, who in Pakistan is giving it to who, and why someone is receiving it. We know that the Pakistani military and intelligence community supports some of the extremist groups that are engaged against United States interests and which have committed acts of terrorism against civilians. So again, Mr. Speaker, I come around to the point that we spend absolutely too much money on military and defense matters, that we do not give half the same attention to debating as we do about cutting nutrition support, as is proposed for infants and children, or financial aid to college students. When Belgrade, Florida, in the congressional district that I serve, comes looking for less than $1 million to fix their infrastructure and provide jobs for their local residents, the Republican majority has a whole long list of reasons of why we can't afford it. And yet before us today, I see $5 billion for 2 submarines, $2 billion for 1 destroyer, and $6 billion for 32 fighter jets. I maintain, Mr. Speaker, that our level of defense spending is on an unsustainable course. And at a time when we are demanding that the American people do more with much, much less, we also have to make choices and set priorities when it comes to our nation's military spending. Mr. Speaker, I at this time would reserve the balance of my remarks.